This video is sponsored by Squarespace. I think a lot of you will be able to relate when I tell you I've been impatient for spring. And so when I was in Costco the other day and I saw that they had all of my shade garden plants that I needed for crazy deals in these $20 bags that they sell, I just, you know, it's easy for all the money to disappear. So I'm really excited to share with you all the Costco stuff I've picked up this time. I've already spent $300 on these Costco bags because they're such a good deal. Back when I was buying wholesale from, sources that, only farmers and businesses have access to, the prices were really comparable to what the cost of these Costco bags are. So, I really don't feel bad dropping the money on them. Behind me is a space that I'm going to be developing this spring, summer. This is all complete shade. Right now it's getting a little bit of light because the trees, they don't have leaves, but summer, it's really cool, really shady all through here, which is something that I haven't had access for growing in my entire growing history. Even though I've been gardening for over 20 years at this point, I've never had the chance to have a large and lush shade garden. So my plan is I've given myself a budget of $1,000. This is about 1,000 square feet all here around me that I'm gonna fill in with shade plants. But because, $1,000 doesn't go very far when you're trying to get 1,000 square feet worth of plants, these Costco bags are really going to build a really nice backbone for me in the more simple stuff so that I can afford to, pay $20 a plant for some more specialty things to fill in. But it's a little cold and rain is threatening, so I'm going to show you everything that I purchased inside. Very excited about all this Costco stuff. I have a whole pile of things that I've been purchasing, and it really is to the point that I need to just not look at these bags of plants when I get in. They've been near the front of the Costco, so every time I go in to get some groceries, I'm like, oh, new plants, and then they tempt me. But I got some very, very serious scores, and I'm really excited about the base of the shade garden that I'm going to be able to build with, the amount of money that I spent here. Altogether, I think I have spent another $240, I think. But as I said, my budget for my shade garden is $1,000. Some of this stuff is going to be throughout other areas of the garden that I'd already been planning on purchasing at a more expensive price. So I'm really excited about what I have to share. The first one is something I did not plan at all, but when I saw it, I was like, wow, that is not normally what you would find in a Costco for a plant, and so I had to pick it up. So I got 2 of these peonies. So last fall I ordered 80 peonies or something crazy, and I ended up planting the entire perimeter of the bottom of my property with just what is going to hopefully be a hedge of peonies. I think in total I put in about 60 peonies, and it's gonna look really gorgeous, but there was a few spots that I dug a hole and there was still space, so I was like, okay, I have space for a couple more peonies. And the one thing I definitely didn't have is a yellow peony. So this is an Ido variety of peony. So if I remember correctly, that means that these are a cross between the normal garden peonies and the tree peonies. And it makes it so that they're even more productive for flowers. They're really beautiful, really strong, healthy plants. So each of these bags have a single peony in them. I've seen this specific one sold before, and they're usually $40. So to get one of these for 20 is really exciting. On the farm, we did have a yellow peony, but the yellow that it was kind of just a cool white. It was very much not showy yellow. It was kind of in the white tones. But I'm excited to see these. I've seen pictures of them in other people's gardens. I've never seen these in person, and they usually look quite yellow. So these, you know, this $40 for these 2 plants it was totally an impulse buy. But you know, I don't think I'm gonna regret having grabbed these. It was funny too, when these went to get scanned in, these like weren't in the Costco, like they didn't scan. The person was like, why isn't this scanning? And they had to like hand type in the code. So it almost seemed like, oh, maybe there was just a couple of those randomly, like it wasn't like they intentionally purchased those. Okay, next up, I have a bag of bleeding hearts. So this is, I think that this is just the classic bleeding heart. And this bag has 5 of them in there. So I love bleeding hearts. I think they're really pretty. I've never had shade, right? So I've always struggled to be able to grow a lot of these kind of shade loving plants like really effectively. On the farm, I bought 100 of these because they bloom around Mother's Day. And, you know, I was always looking for anything that could possibly bloom in Mother's Day. And there was a spot that was kind of partial shade. And so what would happen is they would grow up in the early spring, they would bloom, and then they would kind of go dormant. They'd die back completely in the summer heat. And then it was like there wasn't plants there at all. But previously, when I had a really small shade garden, because I love bleeding hearts, I had one of these classic bleeding hearts, and it went through the summer a little bit more. The leaves, they're like really fleshy, really juicy. Yeah, they're the type of thing that, you know, could dry out and be really affected by the heat and the sun that we get. So I'm excited to see how these are gonna do in an actual dedicated real shade garden, because I like the foliage as well as the flowers. But yeah, so 5 of them. You know, this, yet again, I was going to get 1 or 2 bleeding hearts. There is another variety, there's a few different varieties of bleeding hearts that I really like. There's a really pretty little compact one where the foliage is almost ferny and lacy and like a silvery color that I've grown before, and I love those and they're beautiful, and I could still see me purchasing those like in the future for going into the shade garden. But the thing that I really like about what I got here in these Costco purchases is this is gonna put in a backbone. You know, having 5 of these larger bleeding hearts, you know, this is gonna take up like, because these get quite big when they're mature. So I'd probably want to give it about a square meter of space. So, you know, that right there is going to be taking up like almost 10 square feet of the 1,000 square feet of shade garden that I have, you know, so this is going to be a really good center in the garden, spreading these out. Yeah, so, you know, buy it now, get it in, right? Like five of these at 20 bucks, $4 each, right? Like $20 to get in something that's going to be really impactful and really showy. Maybe not this year, but by next year, like it's really going to build up that garden. You know, one of the things about building a garden is when you go and you buy a bunch of these perennials. All these bags are a great example of how that idea works. This says it has 7 perennials in it, right? And like this bag isn't that big, right? So these plants are just, they're small. They're gonna need some years to get in and get established and grow to their full size. So when you first plant these gardens, they look really sparse. They don't really look like there's a lot going on, and it's easy to put in way more plants than what your garden actually needs because, you know, you want it to look good in those early years. But if you can be patient and plant it out according to the actual size that plants get, you know, it's 3 years and it's going to be filled in, even though in that first year or two, you know, the plants are going to kind of look more spaced out than they need to be. Getting these Costco purchases, you know, at these really great prices that I'm picking them up, you know, where I'm getting plants that are, you know, $2, $3, $4 each to fill in space. If in the future, as things fill in, I decide, you know, I don't actually want 5 bleeding hearts. I'd rather have that 10 square feet back where I could fit in, you know, 10 1-foot sized plants, you know, get some smaller stuff into the garden. But if I spend a little bit of money now and I fill it in with some of these larger things, you know, it makes it so it'll be showy sooner without blowing my budget and making it so I can't afford to put in all the other gardens that I'm hoping to put in this year. Okay, so this pack, normally I wouldn't want to buy just like a mix of things because I'm a little picky about varieties. You know, a few of these things are stuff that I wouldn't normally purchase because a few of these things are, you know, unnamed varieties, right? Like this, well, I guess this one's named, but they're kind of mixes, and I'd prefer to know exactly what I'm putting in and pick them specifically. But like I said, this stuff can go in and it doesn't have to stay. And I really liked the you know, this as a little bit more of a mix. So there is 2 hostas in here, and it's saying it's Albon Marginata is the variety. And I looked it up. This one's a little bit smaller than the other hostas that I purchased in here. And it's really classic. It's really simple. So like I like the look of it. And then it has a Dicentra luxuriant. And that's a bleeding heart. And this it's a darker color flower, and the structure of it's a little bit different. Kind of like how I was saying that there's that smaller lacy one that I really like. This is kind of more of like a mid-size one, you know, and like a bleeding heart looks like a bleeding heart, but some of these other bleeding hearts are really pretty. Like the foliage is very fern-like, and I really enjoy it, you know, so this is kind of fun. And then there's 2, I don't want to try to say this in its Latin name, but these are ladies' mantles. So really pretty, getting some of those chartreuse colors in. Smaller flowers, smaller foliage. You know, because like what my goal is with that shade garden is to have a whole mixture of colors and textures and sizes. You know, like I want some bigger hostas, but I also want some smaller hostas. I want some things that are ferny and lacy. I want some things that are solid and structured. You know, so I'm really excited. I'm really excited about this garden and what I'm going to put together. And then there's 2 astilbe diamant, I guess, but it's a white astilbe with the green foliage. So really pretty looking one. And I think when I looked it up, this one was a little bit taller. So yeah, so I liked the mix of this, you know, like 7 perennials for 20 bucks. That's like less than $3 each, right? I definitely felt like, okay, get a little bit of that to play with. Okay, then what else do we have in here? Okay, so I bought 3 of these mixed astilbe bags, and these each have 6 different astilbes in them, and they're showing that it's going to be a mix of all the different colored blooms. If I look at the picture, you know, I'm assuming the picture is supposed to be similar to the varieties that are in here, but they're random, so I don't know. But it's showing that there's some of the lighter green and the darker green foliage. You know, so like a good variety of stuff. So I bought 3 of these so that there's 18 of these. The astilbe, you know, there's something that's really, really beautiful for its flower. But my main thing that I really want to focus on in a shade garden is what they're going to look like when they're not flowering. The astilbe flowers, you know, my mom has grown these a bunch. My mom is a really really proficient like gardener and garden designer, and she loves perennial gardening. Like growing up, you know, she was always growing stuff, and she's had shade gardens over the years. So there's a lot of this kind of stuff that I've never grown, but I am still familiar with it. And if I remember correctly, quite often the astilbe flowers last for quite a while. Like I think the flowers last. But if I remember, I think they bloom kind of like late spring, early summer, and the blooms stay on kind of throughout the summer. They are something that could be used as a cut flower too, right? So I know that when I was sharing my farm tour, some people were mentioning like, oh, you know, there's things that you could have in your shade garden that could be still used for cuts. And I think people brought up the astilbe specifically. And, you know, like I was kind of having this in mind, though sometimes sometimes in a garden, it's nice to keep some of the flowers, right? So, you know, there's 18 astilbe here. I'm not gonna say, oh, perfect, I'll get a bunch of astilbe cuts off of it, because it would probably be nice to have a little bit of mixed color in with all the greenery, but always there as a possibility. And then I also, you know, because that, like, I bought those for like the deal, right? Like, what, $3.33 if there's 6 of them for an astilbe plant, right? Like, because the garden that I'm building here is 1,000 square feet, that's pretty big, right? So if I was, you know, I said I have this budget of $1,000. If I was to go out and buy specialty plants that cost $10, $20, $30, $40 each, and then fill the space with those, things would be really sparse, right? So by getting like 18 astilbe, you know, they're still gonna be quite spread out over 1,000 square feet. You know, like the path, you know, I think it's about like, it's kind of similar to 20 by 50 space, right? So even if I kind of had them all in a line down the garden with 18 of them, you know, that's still, there's only one every 3 feet, right? Like it takes a lot of plants to start to fill in these spaces and make them not look so empty. Probably how I'm gonna plant a lot of this stuff is kind of in clusters of 3. This is kind of a common, like, basic perennial garden design idea. You know, you kind of put things in clusters of 3 because it looks better to have things kind of grouped together to show something and then have a gap, rather than to like have a big gap, a big gap. So, you know, with that, you know, I could have 6 clusters of like astilbe throughout the garden, have something visually. But yeah, just, you know, yet again, this isn't necessarily the best, most exciting things that I'm going to get into the shade garden, but it's going to create a really great backbone for an amazing price. Yeah, so the next one that I got here is another astilbe, and this one is by name specifically. This is Arendacea, and I looked it up, and this one's a little bit of a bigger astilbe. So like a little bit more height. Yet again, like I said, the other bags are random. I don't know what they're gonna be, but so this is gonna do like a good structure to go along with that. 2 more things for the shade garden. I bought some hostas. So this is called Gold Standard, and there's 8 of them in these bags. $2.50 Hosta. And this one's pretty big, this variety. If I remember correctly from when I looked it up as I was standing in the aisle at Costco, I think this one's about 1 meter, right? So this gets to be quite a large hosta. And like this one's classic. Like, this is, like, you see this everywhere. But it's really attractive. I really like it. It has like that bit more of like a chartreusey green color with the edging. I think this is quite chartreuse. It's less yellow. I know there's some varieties that kind of have the darker green edge that can be quite yellow, but I think that this one is more into those chartreuse tones. My plan is to have the majority of the hostas be in a chartreuse tone. I love hostas. They're one of my favorites, and they come in these amazing colors. But like kind of the most classic, you've seen it everywhere, and like I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head. But it's like a blue-green, and it's quite large, and the leaves are like very structured. It's a beautiful hosta, but I'm going to be moving kind of away from those blue tones. I'll have a few mixed in, but I don't want that to become the backbone of the garden. I want it to be more of these like chartreusey tones. And there's so many hostas now, right? Like there's like so many different varieties of them. I remember when my mom first got into hostas in the 90s, and we went to Vancouver, like 4 hours away, and she was like, we are going to a specialty Hosta nursery and we drove like forever into this like neighborhood, and it was like this person's like very small like nursery in their yard. Like the person, like we drove into someone's driveway and they came out. It was like some crazy Hosta collector. And like I remember seeing the hostas in the 90s and being like, wow, look at this. Like, who knew there was this many? And it's like now, no matter where you go, there's that many options. And when you actually start looking at some of the more specialty ones, it's just incredible how different they can all look, from these tiny, tiny little plants, these massive, massive leaves and all the colors. So I do have 1,000 square feet, but that's not endless. So I can't have an infinite number of hostas. So I'm gonna be a little picky about what goes in. But yeah, so 8 of this gold standard I think is gonna be really nice. And then I got, this is another like classic. This is Patriot. This is probably like one of the most, yet again, one of the most common hostas by name, and there's 8 of them. And this one's a little bit smaller, like a little bit more compact. Still, you know, this is, maybe it's not quite a meter, but it's still gonna be, you know, like a pretty good sized plant. And then it has more of like the green tones with the whites. And yeah, like I've seen this grown all over the place. Like so many people have this, and it does look really true to the picture. It is quite white, and it's an attractive plant. So between these two, you know, I'll get something started out there. They're not those blue colors, you know, and then I can start filling in all the chartreuse ones, get some of those like long skinny leaved ones. Yeah, I mean, well, I'm sure there will be a video, not this year, maybe next year, maybe the year after, where I'm like, look at I own 100 different hostas collection, because it's not going to take much for me to turn into a crazy hosta person. But I don't know. I'm really happy. Like, how many bags do I have there? That is 8 bags. So, you know, that's like $160 that I spent on shade garden plants. And, you know, it's still gonna look super empty going and putting like the 100 plants that I bought, or yeah, not even, out into the garden. But, you know, like I'm really excited about what that first purchase is gonna do for that garden space. But there was more tempting things, so that's not where it ends. So I've already purchased almost 50 dahlias from Costco. What did I get? I got 7 bags, and the dahlias have 7. Yeah, so what is that? 42. So I have space for about 50 dahlias. I could probably squeeze them in a little bit tighter to get even more. And I purposely didn't buy more than what I'd already purchased previously because I wanted to be able to go and buy a few by name. There's a few dahlias that are my absolute favorite dahlias. For example, Marn or Sylvia. It's a really beautiful orange ball dahlia, and I definitely want to have some of those. But man, these Costco bags are so tempting. 7 dahlias for 20 bucks. You know, if I go to the nursery and I try to buy like these varieties, a single tuber by name is going to be kind of like $10, right? So getting these kind of in at like $3 each is just a crazy deal that makes it really easy to purchase them. So, you know, now I have 9 times 7, so 63 dahlias. So now I have more dahlias than I need. So hopefully that'll keep the temptation down when I go and I start seeing all these beautiful dahlias, because I already have more than I need. But yeah, this, I mean, how could I resist this? This is a Fubuki assorted dahlias. And I'd never heard of these Fubuki dahlias before, but I looked them up and they're just gorgeous, right? Like they're kind of frilled looking, you know, so they're kind of a decorative. And it's not necessarily that the petals are like shredded, but almost like they have extra petals. I don't like, they're just really interesting. They're kind of a shape that I haven't seen in a dahlia very often. I've definitely never grown anything that looks similar to this. You know, and then the colors that they're showing on the bag, like these fabukis came in like a huge range of colors. There was like tons and tons of them when I looked it up online. This is showing like a white, a yellow, a white and pink, or white and red, a red, and then kind of like a pinky color. So I don't know if this is going to be specifically the mix or some of the other colors are included in, but these look so different than the varieties that I've already gotten. And like I said, these Costco bags, they're too tempting. They're so tempting that they're a problem for me. And then the other thing that I previously purchased was a bunch of lilies. I got a bag of the Asiatic lilies in the dark color, but I mainly got oriental lilies because I really love the scent of oriental lilies. But I do like Asiatic lilies too. And the one thing that's nice about Asiatic lilies is that they bloom earlier than the orientals. So if I plant them together, when I go and I plant them in the garden, if I do them in clusters and I mix the Asiatic and orientals together, it'll kind of make it so I get like a month of lily bloom showing. And then they're such amazing cut flowers. So, you know, it's hard to resist having a bunch of these in the garden because I don't have to leave them in the garden. I can cut them and bring them in, and they come back year after year after year. So this is an Asiatic hybrid, Tango assorted. And like the colors on this mix was just so pretty and so different from what I've already purchased that I was like, you know, what's another 15? Like, I mean, if I'm honest, these lilies, this is gonna be me every single year. I go into Costco when these come in and I'll be like, what's another bag? I'll find a spot that, like, you know, they'll just keep filling in. Okay. All of these plants though, none of this was an intentional Costco purchase. This was all an impulse buy because I went to Costco to buy a planter. This is the only thing that I was planning on buying. I had zero plans to be buying bags and bags worth of shade plants and more dahlias and more peonies, all these things that I really didn't need. What I was going for was to buy these beautiful and amazingly priced planters because I want to get something going on my deck. Off of my bedroom, I have like quite a large deck off onto the back of the house, and there's no stairs down to it, so it's only accessible from my bedroom. But I'm hoping to, you know, have a little like patio area out there. The garden itself that I'm planning in the back, I'm going to be putting in a fire pit, but there's not really going to be like a hangout patio space. There's not really going to be a space for like a table and chairs. You know, I'll have some chairs that can sit around the fire pit, but you know, I imagine that the fire pit is going to be mostly used kind of like spring, then not in the summer, and then fall and winter, and it's going to be more when it's cool. So I'm really excited to try to set up like a beautiful space on this deck, but pots are insanely expensive. Part of the reason why I've never really done kind of patio garden spaces is it's a huge amount of money to buy these planters already made or to put them in. And, you know, a single planter doesn't necessarily look really showy. Ideally, I'd like that entire patio space to have a bunch of planters, lots of plants. There's a railing on it and it kind of hangs down, like that could be seen from the backyard as well as hanging down for me to see from my bedroom. And I'd love to have like planters that are actually on the railings where I could plant nasturtiums, something that would trail down and, you know, handle the summer heat. It would be amazing to have a whole bunch of different planters out there. But, you know, Rome wasn't built in a day, and so my dream garden plans, the same as like what I'm saying for the shade garden, I'm gonna build a backbone I have a budget of $1,000. I can spend that this year. I can get something that will be something, and then every year I can add on to it. And so even though I would love to have 10 of these planters, it wasn't in the budget. But so what I did is I bought 3. And so, you know, I can kind of like have one in the corner and then one in the middle of the deck area, and you know, it'll look attractive, and then I can be tempted to buy some smaller planters throughout the year, I'm sure. Or, you know, gather up pots here and there at garage sales over the years. But this'll be a great start. These came in both this gray color as well as a black color. It's so hot out on that deck. Like it's gonna get like 50 in the summer afternoons. So I did not go for black because it's gonna be hard enough to keep things alive and watered. So I'm really excited about these planters. And then, because one of the things that I really want to put into planters like this, I want to put canna lilies. I love the tropical look of them. You know, like those, or like an elephant ear plant. I love those. Those, they sell them at the nursery and they're like $20 each. So I don't think they're in the budget. But conveniently, mixed in with all the bags, they actually had a canna variety. So this is just an assorted, you know, in the picture it's showing that there's a pink and an orange and a red and a yellow, and there's green and there's a dark leaf one. I was planning originally to, you know, actually spend a bit of money, get a variety that I really liked. I really like the green leaf is my preference. I've grown these sometimes before, as like just a garden plant treat for myself. And then I really love, they have greens that have like the orange flowers, which is like one of my favorite combos. But yeah, for 7 of them for $20, like as opposed to yet again, like spending 10 or 15 or $20 on the individual plants, I was like, you know what? I'm spending the money on these like planters. If I get this, like this'll save me a bit of money. And then I can see what they look like when they bloom. If it's a variety that I'm not like, if I'm kind of like, like I don't really like the look of that one, you know, I can always get rid of it and not save it. But the cannas, so they won't survive outside. They're like the dahlias. They grow like a root, like a tuber. And then if you want, you can bring it in and you can save them. So, you know, this bag with 7 different cannas in it, you know, when you put it into the ground and you grow it in this pot all year, it's going to go from like a tiny little chunk into like a big cluster, and then I'll be able to save it. And, you know, if there's 2 of the varieties and I really like them, I'll have more than enough to fill pots with in just the 2 that I save for years to come. And, you know, the other ones I can just let them rot out. So, like, even though, you know, I wasn't planning on spending all this money. Here, let's see. I have my receipt. I saved my receipt for it. So I spent $274.85 on all these purchases. Even though I wasn't planning on buying this, I'm really excited for the money spent. With this, I'm going to be getting, you know, the beginnings of a shade garden. I'm going to have the beginnings of like a decorative space on my deck. You know, those, like these, I'm still so stoked on like what a deal these are. Like these are such a score, these peonies. Getting some of those in the garden. You know, those are the type of treats that are the type of things I'll be picking up in my mind like in 5 years, right? Like my thought process at this point is I'm going to be putting in basic and simple and cheap things now, and then in the future I'm going to be able to afford like specialty plants. So, you know, already getting some. I'm really excited, you know, and like, you know, I did have to come inside, and then I was dealing with kid stuff. So, you know, I'm not going to be able to show you kind of the plan for how everything goes out in the garden, but all of these perennials, this is all stuff that, you know, I'm going to start planting like really soon. So it won't be long until I'm going to be taking you guys with me out into the shade garden with these plants, and it's going to be beginning. It's not going to be long before that shade garden is pretty much planted for the year. And thank you to my sponsor, Squarespace. If you have a business, don't let it be invisible. Get a website. Squarespace can help you with that. Squarespace is an all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. Whether you're just starting out or managing a growing brand, Squarespace makes it easy to create a beautiful website, engage with your audience, and sell anything from products to content to time, all in one place, all on your terms. I love how easy they make it for me to build a website. But that's not all. Squarespace payments and invoicing helps me run my business in person too. Domains by Squarespace makes it the first as well as last stop in building my website. And they even have tools to help me sell content or courses, which is really valuable for a creator like me. Go to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/youcan'teatthegrass to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.